Hello and welcome to the MethodSpace Live webinar, Publishing Trends and Academic Writers, presented by MethodSpace, which is sponsored by Sage Publishing. MethodSpace.com is the online home of the social and behavioral science research community. Now, this 1-hour webinar will be recorded and archived at MethodSpace for future viewing. We'll be sending out a link to view it and to access the slides to all registrants in the coming days. Now, in celebration of Academic Writing Month, today MethodSpace is bringing you a conversation on what the trends in publishing mean for academic writers in particular. This conversation will be moderated by Janet Zumbrun, the methods guru at MethodSpace and co-author of Publishing from Your Doctoral Research, Create and Use a Publication Strategy, and the forthcoming second edition of Doing Qualitative Research Online. Her guests today are Rebecca Bayeck, Eric Schmieder, and Janet Zumbrun. Rebecca is a dual PhD holder in learning design and technology and in comparative and international education from Pennsylvania State University. Currently a CLIR postdoctoral fellow at the Schoenberg Center for Research in Black Culture, she engages in digital research, data curation, and inclusive design. Her interdisciplinary research is at the interface of several fields such as the learning sciences, literacy studies, and game studies. Eric Schmieder is the membership marketing director for the Textbook and Academic Authors Association, or TAA. He has taught computer technology concepts to curriculum, continuing education, and corporate training students since 2001. A lifelong learner, teacher, and textbook author, Eric uses technology in ways that improve results in his daily processes and the lives of those he serves. His latest textbook, Web Database and Programming, a foundational approach to data-driven application development using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, MySQL, and PHP First Edition, is available now through Sentia Publishing. He edits the Abstract blog, which is open access on the TAA site. And he's also been an active Academic Writing Month partner with MethodSpace for the last 3 years. Sharon Zumbrun is Associate Professor of Educational Psychology and a co-director of the Motivation and Context Research Lab at Virginia Commonwealth University. As a feelings and learningologist, she spends a lot of time thinking about and studying writing motivation and self-regulation. She's published several research articles on the writing context, writing self-efficacy, writing attitudes, perceptions of feedback, and writing strategies. And her new book, Why Aren't You Writing? Research, Real Talk, Strategies, and Shenanigans, is available now at sagepub.com. And importantly, she self-identifies as a struggling writer, depending on the day. Now, if any of you have any problems with the audio or viewing mode during the webinar, please use the Q&A box on the right side of your screen, and one of our team members will get back to you ASAP. And speaking of the question box, why not tell us where you're linking in by using the Q&A box right now? And we'll be answering questions from the audience in the second half of this webinar, but if you have questions that arise while you're listening, feel free to post them at any time. And if you ask questions and you don't hear us address it live, take a look at methodspace.com after and see if we've answered it in writing afterwards. And one last quick aside, if you want to know what you as academic writers need to know at the process as it exists today, last year's Academic Writing Month webinar featuring publishing industry professionals is archived on MethodSpace. And with that, we'll pass it over to Janet Zumbrun.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. So today we are going to have a conversation. So if you were hoping for a lecture, you came to the wrong place, because we're going to have an interactive dialogue, and I hope to include you in that, either by answering questions towards the end or in follow-up posts on MethodSpace. So when thinking about the theme for this year's Academic Writing Month, I reflected on how my own practice has changed. If you want to go to the next slide. Because I think about the things that I've done in the last couple of years, and the changing forms and formats, going from kind of full textbooks to single topic mini books, using my professor skills in interactive ebooks designed to plug into online learning platforms, lots more work with graphics, photos, art. Just, clearly things are changing. So I wanted to learn more about those trends, and hopefully to find some tips that would help either new academic writers or people who are at the crossroads of their careers, which we know with the pandemic describes many people who are thinking about how they might kind of build a credibility in a new area. So I'm delighted today to be joined by our panelists, and we're going to explore 3 questions from these 3 perspectives. And let's get started. So the first question is, what trend should academic writers prioritize and address right now? And we'll first have Eric, then Rebecca, then Sharon. So take it away, Eric.
Real quick before Eric speaks, Janet, your mic is a little bit, there's a little bit of feedback and glitchiness on this. So if you could take a look. And sorry, Eric, please proceed.
That's okay. So thanks, Janet. So for those that may have missed the question there, you've asked what trends should academic writers prioritize and address right now? And honestly, I think that what we need to focus on is a digital first perspective. You know, that trend is pervasive throughout all of our academic and our textbook industry as well. So yeah, that digital first perspective, you know, the natural tendency is to think ebooks, yeah, and electronic journal articles and so forth. But I think that as authors, we need to consider how we're presenting our work as well. So not just, you know, from the printed format and the ebook or electronic form of presenting our final manuscript, but also, you know, how we approach conferences. We're seeing, particularly with this year's transitions, a lot more virtual presentations, technology issues that we might be addressing and working with along the way, and developing a comfort zone that maybe is not our traditional comfort zone. So things like social media, you know, as you got from my introduction, I'm a technology person. So for me, that's been comfortable, but you know, not everybody has that comfort to put themselves out there, but it can drive an audience. It can, you know, build a conversation like we're going to have today on, you know, trends and topics well beyond just our natural delivery of things. And then things like open access journals. You mentioned that, you know, I publish on the blog that is available openly to anybody who visits our website. So, you know, those types of things, again, are avenues for us to continue dialogue and conversation to an audience that may otherwise not have been reached by a traditional publishing format in journals or, you know, even textbook environments. So that's, you know, for me, the trend that we need to focus on and prioritize is a digital mentality.
Okay.
And thanks, Eric. And I would actually second that and say that something that I've seen a lot as well, blog posts. So when you have an idea, you know, depending, of course, in your field, but when you have an idea or you want to publish something really quick to put your name out there, blog posts, that's definitely things that you can do. Either you can create your own website and write your blog post, or you can just kind of, you know, depending on the organization, like even if you belong to an institution, there are places where you can actually blog and post your article out there. But also something that I feel like is really important for academic in these days is opinions, right? So when you create that connection with newspapers, be at your organization, like they have journals. It can be a student journal, it can be, you know, your own college kind of publication, reaching out there, writing things on there where that you feel like, you know, are kind of will be part of either your research or a new idea that you have. I think those are new ways to you kind of think about publishing, but also writing about your own research.
Sharon?
Hi, thank you both. I want to echo those ideas. And I also, you know, kind of at the heart of that is really understanding your audience, which I know is kind of our next question, but thinking about in what ways can we repackage some of our work that we already have and maximizing our time to really thinking about who is my readership, and perhaps broadening that readership, who's not reading my work, kind of the flip of that, and who needs to read it, and thinking about in what ways might we maximize digital resources to make our work a bit more friendly to those audiences. So as a professor, I'm thinking of as somebody who writes a lot about my research, I'm thinking more about, well, how do I get that research into practitioners' hands? So thinking about making it a bit more conversation friendly with perhaps creating an infographic that kind of is a bite-sized way of getting that work to that audience, a kind of an appetizer, if you will, of thinking like, how do I get interested in this work, and then they have kind of a trail to see more resources and get more information if they're interested in understanding more of that work. So I think it's about definitely about using digital resources to reach more audiences, but really understanding what is it that the readers read, and how do they get that information. And I think the blogs is one way to do it, and certainly about once those pieces are written, using social media to get that writing out there is another way to amp up your readership.
Great. So I think, I mean, one of the common threads in all of your comments is kind of, get your work out there throughout the process, rather than thinking in terms of, waiting until, all the research is completed and the articles are completed and everything is done, and then, kind of throwing it out there. Instead, to maintain communication throughout the process and presenting it in ways that different kinds of audiences could appreciate. So I think, for a lot of us, we look at all of these different options and think, well, where do I start, and how should I prioritize my time? So that's our next question. What decision-making process do you recommend when thinking about what to publish? And we'll have first Rebecca, then Sharon, and then Eric.
Thanks, Janet. I think that's a very interesting question. I look back at what I do personally, right? So I'm thinking, what is it that I want to be part of, right? So what conversation do I want to be part of? What is it that, let's say, from a student or an early scholar, what is it that I've been working on and that has been of interest to me? So you may have some scholars that you've been following, you're interested in their work, and you're like, oh, what is it that I want to be part of? And then now when you think about that, that kind of guides you on where and how you want to publish. So let's say you're interested, there's something that I'm really interested in, like, let's say, computational thinking. So I go into it and I say, okay, who are the people who have been, working or publishing on computational thinking? Where have they been publishing, right? So, and then now, because I want to be part of that larger conversation, that kind of guides my decision on where is it I want to publish and how I want to engage in that kind of conversation. So I think something that's really important is just to make sure that, okay, what is it that I'm passionate about? What is it that of interest to me? Who is it that I've been following? Who is it that I've been reading? That kind of sparks some kind of interest in me. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I want to be part of this conversation. And then because I want to be part of that conversation, now that kind of gives me the direction of where is it I want to be involved in and how I want to kind of get my name out there. And then I think that will definitely guide you and guide us on where to publish and how, make best use of your time, I would say.
I love how you frame that, Rebecca, how you say, like, what conversations do I want to be a part of, and who do I want to be reading that work? And I think, as someone who publishes primarily in journals, because my gig, again, is I'm a professor and the coin of my realm is still in academic journals. So I think about where those, when I'm looking for journals to publish in, I certainly look at where people are publishing, but I make sure that I have not just one place that I'm going to submit my work to. I like to have lots of backups. because sometimes they're needed. I will say most of the time they're needed in my work. And so having lots of backups and being really real about the process of finding like, okay, well, you know, this is my choice A, this is my choice B, and this is my choice C, and well, you get the idea, D and E. But what guides my process in thinking about where is often about, you know, who is this work meant to? So I talked about in my, just a second ago about how do I get practitioners to read this? So I might repurpose this work that was a research study for a high impact research journal, because that's what that's perhaps what my university wants to see. But I, as a former practitioner myself, I want my readership to include practitioners so that they can implement the meaningfulness, the practical implications of research. So I'll look. I pay special attention to what practitioners are reading, what are the practitioner journals, and sometimes they're not what you might expect. They might be magazines. They so I would suggest thinking about talking to practitioners or talking, truly just asking who your audience is, asking real life people in those areas about what do they read, where do they read. To really get an idea of how to reach those audience a little bit better. A simple poll on social media might do the trick. Just ask strangers about where they are reading to understand, you know, where you might put that work, and then repackaging the same work for a different outlet.
Excellent. Well, ladies, you guys, I think, hit on the first two things that I had thought about here. So I'm gonna see if I can maybe assign just some words to those. And what I heard Rebecca say was focus on interest, right? Personal interest and what, you know, matters to you, and the ideas that you want to convey to other people. And then what I heard Sharon say was, you know, audience. Right? You know, who and where are they? And, you know, what is it that maybe is outside of our academic circles in terms of the people that we actually want to reach, and why it matters to them. And that's where my thoughts with this question of the decision-making process was really the why, you know, what matters. And, you know, what matters first to me personally as a practitioner, as an author, as an academic, you know, where are my interests? Because if I don't have an interest in it, then I'm not going to follow through, right? You know, so aligning with your personal interest, and then saying, okay, within my field, where can I make a difference, right? And you mentioned impact factors, Sharon, and journal impact factors, you know, guide a lot of those decisions, I think, particularly modern age. But you know, they come from the idea of they're publishing work that matters in the field, right? So, and then finally, you know, looking at a larger perspective, which I think, you know, Sharon also brought in with the practitioner focus, is society at large. And again, you know, I hate to keep bringing up COVID, but we're sitting in the middle of it. You know, this year we've seen so much fast-tracked research, right? We've seen so many opportunities for things to go to, you know, a practical application of research, that are trends in academic publishing. The decision is, well, where can I make the biggest impact, you know, that may not be the traditional academic audience? So that, I think, is, you know, our decision-making process.
Right. So I like all of the comments that you've made, and thinking about where is the conversation that I want to be a part of. One of those answers may take you beyond your own discipline. So, you know, you may find that, you know, there are, you know, other scholars who, you know, you have something in common with, that you know, want to be, you know, part of that conversation. And, you know, to Sharon's point about, well, you know, what is it that is acknowledged, rewarded, or kind of expected within your own field or your institution. And when I was a professor, the place where I taught did not mandate a particular priority in terms of publication style. And so I thought, well, if that's the case, I want to write books because I'm an educator at heart and I want to write books that people can use to learn because that's my choice. So, you know, as you're thinking about your priorities, you know, they could be, you know, any of those. But I think going back to our earlier point that, you know, thinking about your readership, you know, who do you want to reach and how do they like to receive information? So maybe you have to actually, you know, talk to some people, you know, who are the practitioners in your field, who are the professionals who can use your stuff. You know, do you find that you've got your academic writing and then maybe you've self-published a guide that goes, you know, that's a how-to about, you know, what you were working on. So lots of good ideas there. Then the third question is, well, okay, if we're going to try all of these things, they may draw on different skill sets than we've traditionally used. You know, as we know, when people come into, particularly into a doctoral program, one of the big things you have to learn is how to do writing in that kind of scholarly style that may be different than what you've used in the workplace or elsewhere. And then, you know, now we're looking at, well, we need to be able to do media and graphics and blog posts and all sorts of other things. So I'd like to ask you to talk about what skills you think academic writers should be developing right now and any strategies that you would suggest that would help.
So I
And it
think
will
this
be
is
Sharon, Eric, and Rebecca.
Thanks. I think this is such a big question. I think it's a really big question because, like Eric pointed out, you know, we are very much in the middle of a viral and racial injustice pandemic, and that really takes a toll on humans and the work that we do. And so, a big thing that I write about is the shenanigans that get in the way of our writing progress. And boy, I don't think you have to look far to see what's in our way right now. And so the big things that I focus on, I'll leave it to the other panelists to talk about tools, but I'm going to focus my answer mostly on kind of things to keep in mind and where to keep your focus. And I think the biggest thing right now for myself as a writer and for my graduate students who are writing, my clients who are writing, is really redefining grace, redefining good enough, being really thoughtful about that critical lens that we tend to see ourselves through. I think academics by nature are a pretty critical bunch for good reason. That's a big part of our job. Unfortunately, that can take a real toll on our mental health and well-being when we turn that focus inwards, which is also really common. And so I would say really thinking about redefining good enough to say, no, literally define it. Like, what does good enough look like for you? Where is that bar? And then giving yourself grace to take a step back and breathe and calling it good enough and being okay with it being good enough. And I think that it really is important my second point is to build a village so that you're able to do that, because I don't think we're able to do these things alone, friends. And so this was brought up before. You know, I like your point, Janet, about kind of reaching across different disciplines and building a community, and collaborating with others might bring in different humans into your life that you might draw on in different ways. And I think looking for support is one of those important ways, is just kind of sharing where you're at and being real with other people about where you're at, and sometimes the funk of what we find ourselves in when it comes to academic writing. And so really leaning building the village and then leaning on the village. And then I think the last part is related to both of those things, is building a very minimal practice. I say minimal practice because of that whole need to redefine good enough. As somebody who gets really excited about new ideas, I like to say yes to all the things. And I know that that is not in my best interest right now. Or sometimes other people that I'm collaborating with. And so kind of making space to redefine good enough to say, how much time can I literally invest in this when there are only so many hours in my day? And then putting that time on the calendar to ensure that I do work on the project with these collaborators and at that specific time of the day or during the week. And leaning on the village to hold me accountable, and not only for the time that I'm investing, but also helping me keep my eye on grace for myself and for my writing, and perhaps for my colleagues with whom I'm writing. So I'll stop. I could go on for days. Okay.
Well, Sharon, I love so much of what you just said. I mean, I feel like that 2-letter word of no is the hardest sometimes to say. And then, that perfectionist nature that I think a lot of us academics share. So finding good enough is wow. I could let you keep going on for days because I need to hear it all, and hold me accountable as well. The thing that I came up with here as far as skill from a, I guess, I hate the term, but soft skill perspective, is flexibility, right? And I think that's, definitely in line with what you were saying, understanding that our traditional approach to doing things may not be the best approach right now, and to be open to other perspectives and other people and other ways of new tradition and new opportunities that present themselves, and we're in a state of change that is laden with opportunity. We can make it a defeatist type thing of we can't do, or we can look at what we can do and all the things that lay in front of us because of that. And I'd be remiss if I didn't come back to tech tools. I'm a tech guy, so technology and the topic of collaboration has come up. The ability for us to share ideas here with who knows how many people on the other end of this webinar right now, and the opportunity to hear the different perspectives and to share them, and that goes into research collaboration, that goes into writing collaboration, that goes into publishing collaboration. So technology can really enable those things, whether it's library database systems to online collaborative storage or document management systems. So I think that we're in an era of opportunity, and that flexibility to reach outside of maybe where we would be otherwise comfortable while in the comfort of our own homes. In particular, we can find our other comfort pieces to then take ourselves into new areas that may provide greater opportunity. So I'll stop there and let Rebecca add.
I mean, Sharon and Eric, they just mentioned everything, right? So I like the part of grace, good enough, right? So kind of just being realistic in a sense, and then I like the fact that technology actually has created a place where we are in the global village, right? So we are not located at the same place, but we can find time to kind of collaborate and talk. So I think when you think about skills, definitely collaboration is definitely going to be a great thing to kind of rely on, because I think we have to get outside our mindset that I need to know everything. I have to be good at every single thing. No, there's no way, right? So otherwise we are no longer human. So you might be good at, let's say, qualitative research, but you want to do something quantitative, right? So quantitative, some kind of analysis. You don't need to you don't need to be good at everything. Reach out to somebody, collaborate with somebody. It doesn't mean that you are not good enough, but it just means that we need each other to complement ourselves. And something that I would also add to what Sharon and Eric said was, I think during this time of pandemic, a skill that I feel like is really important, emotional intelligence, right? We definitely need to develop that skill. You need to know yourself, and what I heard Sharon and Eric say is that idea of flexibility. You need to know how far you can go. You need to know when you need to stop. You need to know how do you balance work and life, because the demands are out there. But when you have that kind of emotional intelligence, that you know yourself, then you can navigate this time, because absolutely, it's getting a toll on all of us, psychologically, emotionally. Some of us have lost parents, friends, and so how do you navigate through that regarding your demands outside it? So I think that is a skill that's really, really important. Emotional intelligence, we definitely need to work on that, and of course, kind of building that circle, that community where you kind of rely on others, and that goes back to that emotional intelligence that you definitely need to build. So I will stop there.
Just terrific points. And, of course, since I write about collaboration, that's one, that I like to emphasize, because I think about, for myself, there are skills that I'm really good at, and there are other things that, if I had all the time in the world, I could learn to become a data scientist, but, it's really not likely. So if I need that as a part of my research and writing, I need to find someone else who has those skills, or maybe, kind of high-end media production, or there, all sorts of things that, gee, I'd like to do this, but, I don't, it's not something that I know how to do. Or with the book that Michael mentioned in the introduction about publishing your doctoral research, I purposely collaborated with Helen Cara, who is based in the UK, because their doctoral programs are different from the doctoral programs in the US. And by collaborating, we could write something that would appeal to a much broader audience. So I think, and you need those emotional intelligence and flexibility and kind of people skills, because I think especially when we're in a student life, we're conditioned to think that everything is about our own individual performance, and that's how I'm going to be measured, and so I need to focus on my own stuff, and to be the hero. But I think that that's not really the case in the modern world. So I know we have some questions coming in, but before we ask Michael to start sharing those, I just wondered if you had any other comments that you would like to share, or respond to points that others on the panel have made.
I just maybe wanted to add that becoming a good writer, of course, reading, right? You definitely need to read a lot of what others have, written about, right? So just kind of to get those skills, unconsciously, and then you know how people are writing, and in that way you will get that kind of academic, right? And I'm talking about like from a student perspective, right? You get into grad school, you don't know how to write, you don't know how to do things, so just reading articles, that will get you to that place. So that's one thing I just wanted to add.
Anybody else? So Michael, why don't you share with us some of the questions that are coming up in the chat?
One of them that came up was if Eric could describe a little bit more about his digital mentality that he cited at the very beginning, and then maybe everybody else could kind of chime in on what their definition of that is.
So digital mentality, technology-wise, I think that we have a lot of opportunities, whether it's as simple as track changes in Microsoft Word, to storing things in Dropbox or OneDrive, to live collaboration in Google Docs. And we have, so from a development perspective, a lot of technology tools that can make our lives much more streamlined, instead of going through phases and iterations of development and redesign and editing and return and back and forth, the traditional, I guess, email or even postal mail approach to writing larger manuscripts and collaborating with people. We have a lot more real-time opportunity that is presented by technology. The digital first item that I started with, which may also be what's being referred to in that question, I'm not sure which part of the idea that I presented, but the digital first mentality, we're seeing a lot of the major publishers with the kind of movement away from, particularly in textbook industry, the print form of things. And we're seeing a lot more adoption of ebooks and a lot more, encouragement of electronic formats and systems. So our development now becomes almost that of a production process rather than an authoring process from a traditional perspective. So, when I think about trends in the industry at large and, how that affects me as an author or other academic authors, I think we need to think beyond the written word, and think about, well, how will this be framed if it were a PowerPoint presentation? How would this be framed if it were a small module within an interactive, collaborative environment and assessment tool? How would this be framed in an assessment that is there for certification within the field of study that I'm in? And these might be things that traditionally were supplemental, right? And we're seeing a lot less investment in marketing and supplements and a lot more reliance on the original authoring or authoring team in a lot more cases to produce those things kind of right from the start, as opposed to it being add-ons at a later date. So I think that, while we have expediency through the tools, we also are seeing greater responsibility on the authors to be much more than authors. So that's how I would expand on that.
I'll add to that a little bit that, with that comes a big old learning curve for a lot of us. And so really understanding how to use those tools to do just what Eric is saying can be overwhelming sometimes. And so thinking about really, in my practice, I've been toying around with making infographics for my work and making, Janet was saying with guidebooks, and like making guidebooks for my work as well, and using programs that make that learning curve. I'm not a graphic designer. So like that's not my PhD. So how do I do these things that Eric is talking about? What are the tools that I use? So I've been leaning on these tools that make it a little bit easier, make the learning curve a little less steep for somebody who doesn't have that expertise in creating those perhaps documents or visuals, and that's been helpful. I don't know if it's appropriate to share those tools, so I'll just let you all ask and add Sage ask if you'd like me to share. I'm happy to share.
Okay, so the way I thought about it, digital mentality for me is kind of just thinking about what technologies is out there that can help me achieve my goal, right? It depends that specific moment. What is it that I can use to achieve my goal? So let's see if I want to, what's that? Spread the message somewhere. Is the postcards the best way to do that? Is it going to go for me to have TikTok? Is it going for me to post it on Instagram? So that's how I think about it. And then I think when Sharon talks about learning curve, absolutely, because when you think about all these technologies out there, it might take you some time to kind of, learn them. So, but when you think about the way I think I would approach it, and I'm approaching it is, what is it that I want to achieve, and what technologies out there to get me to achieve one thing. And I've never heard about that. So thank you, Eric, for mentioning that, the digital mentality. I was just taking notes. I'm like, this is I'm there to take notes on. So thanks.
And,
I think,
and if I could,
following up on your point earlier, Rebecca, about, finding the conversation. So, one of the things that we can do in the digital world, when you think about, say, the difference between when we were focused on, say, academic journals that were print, and you're going to subscribe to this journal, so you're probably only going to subscribe to the one that is specific to your field. Whereas now, with the digital presence, we can connect across fields. Globally, we can, dip our toes into, all kinds of things and find, where the people who are talking about something that interests me, that I want my work to be placed within this kind of world. So I think there's that kind of community finding and community building. And since I'm sure Eric is too modest to mention, I think that the Textbook and Academic Authors Association is the kind of place where it's across disciplines. The thing we have in common is that we're all writing, we all share that struggle of, the blank page. And, so, and that offers, a lot of skills building opportunities. And I know across the globe, our readers are international. There are other kind of societies for authors and things like that. Look for those and see, what they have to offer you in terms of skills building in some of these areas that maybe you're not as comfortable with, or, as Sharon was saying, looking for the tools that, make it easy to, or easier to get your work out in a digital format.
and if I can just follow up, Rebecca, you mentioned, the right tool at the right time, and technology, particularly digital tools, are not always the right answer. And while we're talking about trends and ideas and where we are in today's landscape and moving forward, I think what we also need to keep in mind is our base skill set of academic writing can't be lost for the sake of applying all of these new things, right? We need to still maintain that craft, and it doesn't mean throw out everything that you've been doing or learning or working with for years now. So
what else do we have, Michael?
So I'm going to violate a little bit. The goal was to look at some of the trends, but I have a question from someone that's an age-old question. How do you deal with research rejections? And then to quote, I just submitted my first paper and I had a rejection. It's been difficult moving forward after that rejection. What do we do?
I will jump in here and say, the way you deal with rejections, that you see rejection as an opportunity, right? So there's a thing that I said, learning from failure. And then when you see a rejection, it's actually an opportunity, because usually what they do is that they give you some kind of feedback. And when they give you feedback, go through it, read it, and address the feedback, because it's making you better. And that's the way you have to address it. And when you're working in the academic world, it doesn't even have to be only the academic, everywhere, even in your life, right? You have things that you've tried and you fail, but if you stop trying, so it's not because it's a paper, it's that you have to apply the same rule or the same principle. Actually, rejection is great. In what sense? In the sense that you learn, right? They give you feedback and you get your paper, and don't put it in the drawer and put it away. No, absolutely not. It may not be just the right journal that you are submitting it to. You get the feedback, you revise it, and actually you submit it somewhere else. So that's what I would say. Take it as a plus, and that's just learning curve. Is going to be part of your life, and as we all know, failures we've experienced in different parts of our life, it doesn't stop us from trying, waking up the next morning and going back again to what we do. So that's the advice I'm going to give you.
I'm not disagreeing at all, Rebecca. I'll just say, though, that sometimes I cannot reframe that quickly. That like, okay, opportunity. Because sometimes it hurts so bad that I just want to give you permission, friend with this question, that it is okay to put it in a box, sometimes literally, like put it in a box and put it under the bed or bury it outside for a few minutes and put it on your calendar to come back to it. Because what Rebecca said is 100% true. But I think sometimes it just, maybe I'm just more sensitive about this, but it takes me some time. I can't just like get back on the horse, if you will, and like, okay, I'm going to resubmit it, even though I can see it ahead of time now. And that I know I expect rejection a lot more now, and so it doesn't maybe hurt as much, but sometimes it hurts really badly still. And so I just like to take time to read through it and then put it away for a bit, and then actually put a note on my calendar to remind me to bring it back out so that I know it's not gone for good. I just needed a break. I need a break from it. We're going to break up for a minute and then we're going to come back together. And I'm going to think about, then I'm in a better space to think about it as an opportunity, to think about the review that it got and to understand how I might improve the work and maybe where I might submit it. And again, what I said earlier about coming up with a plan B and a plan C and a plan D is really about thinking about rejection is so normal, despite how awful it is in this biz, but it is pretty normal. And so kind of expecting it a little bit does take the edge off a little bit.
You know, when we're talking about a moment ago about the digital presence and being a part of that. And so I think in addition to the kinds of, your paper was rejected, or your book proposal was rejected, there's also, you know, that kind of environment on social media that can be very critical. I just interviewed a researcher a week or so ago who had received just like brutal comments, like crazy brutal comments from people online about her work, and you know, it's really, really hurtful. But you know, there's something about that environment that's just kind of anything goes. And so I think today, you know, the skills that we're talking about of the flexibility and kind of forgiving yourself, and I love your strategy of Sharon of just kind of, I'm just going to let this one rest. I'll come and making a date with myself to come back to it. But you know, with some of the things that just, you know, to just understand there is something in the water these days that, you know, people think, you know, the kind of common courtesy that we may have, you know, hoped for is not necessarily present. And I'll also come back to the point of, you know, finding your community of fellow researchers, fellow writers, who undoubtedly have been through this too, and who can kind of, you know, you can cry on their shoulders a little bit and they'll understand.
And I would definitely add to that point, Jenna, that you actually, and I love the fact that Sharon actually said that put it away for a while, allow yourself to cry, right? Like allow to mourn over it. And something else that I would also add to that point is that definitely finding senior scholars who have been through that rejection, sit down with them, people that you trust, right? So sit down with them, and then they will give you that different perspective. Because I do remember that that's what happened to me. I was like, okay, you sit down with them and then they give you a different perspective and they help you shift that mindset and say, hey, you know what, this is not actually that bad, right? You thought it was really bad, the end of the world is not really that bad. So that community building and, you know, and knowing yourself, and it's definitely key. Yeah, absolutely.
And if you come back to the why you're doing this in the first place, you know, especially recognizing that everybody is much more brazen behind a keyboard. You know, I have taught online for going on 20 years, and it's amazing the types of emails I will get from students who never meet me face to face, that would never walk in my office and speak to me in the way that they do in a email format. So, you know, take your reasoning and reframe it. You know, what is your purpose? What is your why? Why have you sat down and initiated all of this work in the first place that got you to the point of that rejection? Because you have done at that point a good deal of work. You know, you did not submit without doing a good deal of work. So celebrate that along the way, and celebrate what that can turn into. And you may just have the wrong audience. Sharon mentioned, who are you doing this for? And maybe that wasn't the person who reviewed your paper. So, maybe you just need to, take what you did and did well, and then send it to someone else who can appreciate it. And, it may be taking the feedback, like Rebecca said, and applying it, or taking that break, like Sharon said, and then applying it. When the question first came up, my gut reaction was, well, cry it out, right? And there's an awful lot of things that don't. I need to take your advice, Sharon, and put it back on my calendar with some of the things, because they end up in file 13. They end up in that dead zone, unfortunately, too often, just because of the ego. And not necessarily taking my own advice of going back to the why I did it in the first place.
Two things. One, if you do have names of products or tools or resources, the audience definitely would love to hear those, and we may be asking for those in the follow-up post for method space. So people definitely do want to hear name brands. They want to know what to use. On the flip side of rejection, what about self-publishing? What does the panel think about that?
I think that there is a place for self-publishing. I particularly think, for those kind of companion pieces, let's say you're someone who wants to give workshops or seminars or even webinars about your topic, and you could create a self-published guide or something like that could help to kind of boost your work of that kind. There's a lot more channels to reach maybe professionals and practitioners that way. In terms of, say, textbooks and readings, if you want your stuff to be adopted in academic courses, I think it's a bit more difficult. At least, where I taught, it would have been very difficult, because they want to, the university wants to adopt books, through the publishers they have relationships with, that they know, will be widely available. But what do others have to say?
I mean, you're absolutely right. Self-publishing is definitely good, but depending on, your fears, like in my fear, definitely you self-publish, okay, blog post, but what counts really is it a peer review journal, right? So is it an academic, like kind of a good publisher? So where do you publish your work? So you definitely need to take into consideration the demands of the context where you're finding yourself, what really matters. And I think that would definitely, going back to the question about decision making, so that would definitely help you to know where is it that you want to publish, and how do you want to publish, and do you want to self-publish, or definitely send it to a journal or whatsoever. So that's what I would say.
I'll just echo that, Rebecca. I think that's really great advice, and reaching out to mentors within your field, because I think it really varies. So, I mean, we're talking about precious time here, and what you don't want to do is sink a lot of time into something that is not, meaningful to you, but meaningful to your readership as well. And so I would just get I would get feedback from those in your field to make the decision that works best for you, for sure.
And I think depending on what it is you're publishing, I mean, I would not self-publish a journal article, but because you kind of need the journal to go around that journal article, but publishing it as a blog post to test the waters first, right? Publishing your ideas in those types of formats, and again, repurposing your material might be ways to kind of test the waters with building an audience that does not revolve around a traditional publishing environment. As far as books go, though, I think that even in a traditional publishing environment, again, we're seeing the role of the author change a lot. There's the expectation that the author is going to do a lot more of that groundwork and marketing and, you know, legwork of communicating with an audience, even in a traditional university environment, that self-publishing sometimes becomes a viable option that way, that you know, might take some of the hurdles out of getting something out there that maybe is already saturated with a particular publisher of interest. So yeah, I kind of go both directions with that particular question, at least bringing in the textbook side of things.
So I'm sad to say that we're coming to the end, and we've got a lot of really meaty questions that need to be answered at some point. So I'm hoping we can do it in a follow-up in method space. But to close, the one thing that really seemed to have struck a nerve is this idea of good enough. And there was a lot of people that were saying thank you, and there were a couple. There was no pushback, but there was one question. It's like, what's the difference between good enough and just plain mediocre?
I love that question. Sometimes nothing, right? It's sometimes the same. I think sometimes mediocre can be good enough, is I guess my pushback. But I think mediocre is in the eye of the beholder, and you have to kind of define that for yourself. So my biggest thing, I think, is really understanding what I think as academics, we hold ourselves to pretty high standards, which, you know, we just kind of touched on very briefly. And so really thinking about what would failure actually look like, and writing it down, and then figuring out what would hitting it off the charts look like, and then where would you be okay in that, and like maybe in your definition that is mediocre. Sometimes for me it is, and then that's where that grace comes in. Like, you know what? Back to that whole pandemic thing. I feel good about that. So is that me a year ago? You know, perhaps not in a pandemic, maybe not, but maybe mediocre is okay right now. So I guess that's my main pushback, is that we've got a lot going on, and I think our standards of excellence perhaps need to change a little bit in places. But knowing that there will be time to pick up maybe a little bit in the future. So that's my primary pushback.
Right. Well, I mean, sometimes there's a just do it aspect. And if you're holding back from doing something that you know, all the kinds of things we've discussed here today, that you feel this is something I really need to do, but I'm going to hold back because I know, you know, there's somebody else who is better than me out there already. There's, you know, I'm not, you know, I don't know whether what I have to contribute is of enough value that it's worthwhile to someone, that there is that kind of just do it, put it out there. Maybe this time what you're doing is just good enough, and then you're going to keep working on it. Or maybe you put it out there and then you find collaborative partners to help you take it to the next level. To keep in mind, especially if you are someone who is new to this world, that this is a process that's going to go on, you know, for a period of time. So, you know, I think about, say, the things that I've worked on where, you know, where I started out, I did some webinars on this topic, and then, you know, I found, oh, well, people are interested in this, and now I'm going to try doing some blog posts, and now I'm going to, you know, I'm going to keep moving with it, you know. So if you think like I'm going to start at the pinnacle of academic publishing from square one, you know, then you know, you're just going to be frustrated. But look at these other things as, you know, steps along the way, things to try that will give you a chance to build your confidence, to hear from others who are going to give you feedback that will help you to improve it. So, you know, rather than think, it's kind of I'm going to go back to Eric's thing about the digital mentality is more of a fluid and evolutionary kind of building process, rather than thinking product process, that it's done now, you know, it's over. So I hope those suggestions will help.
I would only just add to that is that my focus on progress instead of productivity right now is just like, am I moving? Which I really think is what you were saying, Jan. Like, am I making progress on this? And that's
Right.
shifting that to that focus.
Folks, I think that's all we have.
And definitely being kind to
Go
yourself.
on.
Oh, yeah, I was just saying, just being kind to yourself, okay? Just understand that we're not living, and I think that's what Sharon and Jenny were trying to say, like when it's talked about good enough, just being kind to yourself, because there are some days where you wake up, you want to do things, but your body's not responding. Hey, my body's not responding. Let me take that time off, and then tomorrow, I will be in a better mental frame, kind of. So, and that's why we're going back to emotional intelligence, because actually, just being kind to yourself, understanding yourself, because hey, again, we're living in kind of difficult and different times. Yeah.
Right. Well, I hope that this has been helpful to you. We are focusing on Academic Writing Month all of November on methodspace.com. So please come and visit us there, and hopefully you'll find some additional resources that will be helpful as you try to improve and develop your practice as an academic writer.
And there will
thanks
be
to our panel for making time to do this. Very generous, and I hope that that our various perspectives have been helpful to you.
and the folks that are writing in they're all asking you to take a victory lap. So if you could just give us a big thumbs up with your image, that would be appreciated. Thank you, Janet, Eric, Sharon, Rebecca, and to all those that are watching, know that you will receive an email that includes a link to the entire webinar. From having registered, you will receive that. However, if you don't see it, or if you just want to share it, it will be posted on methodspace.com, and it will also have some follow-up information and some of these resources that were mentioned. So thank you all very, very much.
Bye-bye.